Hello, good morning. How are you? I am aware that you cannot see me, and I will fix that in a moment. Okay, you should be able to see me now. Um, this is the face of someone who has not slept all night, which I'm sure is not something you're unfamiliar with because you are students, but it's something I am very unfamiliar with at my age. So bear with me. I had a deadline and I just finished working. So, hence the continued delay. But anyway, let me focus. Last class we stopped at I see so many sleep deprived kindred spirits. I'm guessing you're going to handle it much better than me because I feel like I have maybe, I don't know, 75 minutes of coherent and articulate conversation left in me for your benefit. Uh, okay, so getting to it. Last class, we were talking about emotion, and we kind of stopped off where we were talking about stress. And we kind of stopped where we were talking about the impact that emotions have on your central nervous system and on your autonomic nervous system. And that was related to our conversation, if you recall, about when you feel an emotion, there are three elements to it, right? So there's a psychological sort of recognition of the state or the feeling. There is also a behavioral manifestation. So you might smile, you might frown, you might, uh, uh, tap your hand anxiously or something like that. So, along with the behavioral manifestation and the recognition of the feeling over here, for something to be an emotion, there has to also be a physiological reaction to it, right? So, it's sort of three things together make an emotion an emotion. And the theory that was posited, which was quite seminal or transformative, was Shafta and Singer's theory, where emotion was seen as a two-factor, um, two sorry, was seen as a combination of two factors. So there wasn't just physical arousal; you had to label the physical arousal as per a particular emotional, or you basically had to categorize that physical sensation, that physical state, as a particular emotion for it to qualify as the experience of an emotion, right? And if you remember, there was that example of where they injected these boys with epinephrine, and because the boys knew that their physical arousal was related to the drug, they did not report feeling any emotion. And then building off of that, our French researchers, Zajon, Ledoux, and Lazarus, they said, there are high road emotions and low road emotions. High road emotions are more complex and they pass through I think it was the anterior lobe, and hence they experience, by the thalamus, and hence they experience a certain level of like analysis before you can label them as such, right? So envy is different from feeling, let's say, angry. Anger is very basic human response, right? Envy is something you kind of think about. You have like a more complex like recognition. Oh, I'm jealous of this person because of XYZ that they have and I don't have, and it reflects on this inadequacy that I think, and so on. So essentially, high road emotions are more complex. Low road emotions are primal, instinctive. They just happen. When you feel an emotion, clearly your whole body becomes active, right? And that part of this sort of physiological arousal or physical arousal I keep referring to is activated by your autonomic nervous system, which, as you remember, is connected right to your brain through your spinal cord. And so moving on from there, what essentially you need to consider when you sort of think about emotion is that we have already talked about the relationship between mood and memory, right? So if you are in a bad mood, you may remember more negative things from your past and you may remain in that bad mood. So that's one element of the deeper impact of an emotional state or an emotional experience that you should keep in mind. Now, obviously, there are certain differences that have been reported in, let's say, emotionality between the different genders, and obviously, men are supposed to be less emotional and less empathetic. You can't hear me, Tayyiba? Sorry. Can everybody else hear me? Right, because she's saying that I can't hear anything she's saying. Well, she is right here. And there is definitely a more respectful way of addressing your professor, no matter how sleep deprived. So great, you guys can hear me. All right, so coming back to where I was, what I was saying is that obviously there are gender differences in the experience of emotionality. And so men are perceived and have been revealed to have less capacity for empathy than women. And women are always proposed as being more emotional because they are reported to have more non-verbal sensitivity. But at the end of the day, which I've always told you guys in all of these gendered findings that we've discussed very superficially, that you have to think about, you know, what were the research instruments used, what was the role of culture, what are the gender norms in the particular culture where the study was conducted, what has been the socialization and the learning that these people, these respondents have been exposed to, right? And so I think your generation will understand this far better than older generations. But in a nutshell, that greater empathy or that greater non-verbal sensitivity, right, which refers to your being able to pick up non-verbal cues and determine what other people are feeling or experiencing emotionally, that comes from not actually your gender, right? It comes from the way that you are raised and the input you get from the environment. And if you remember, that environmental input is very important in shaping your identity and your sense of self and your beliefs and your values and how you see the world, right? We also studied that attachment theory, or the sort of attachment you have with the primary caregiver, determines the way that you relate with the world. So obviously there is a lot more complexity to this that, you know, you should sort of think through before you're taking these, you know, clickbait findings for granted, because it's not always the case. You have to critically consider findings like this. And, you know, as I say that, the one interesting thing that comes to mind is that a smile is a smile, whether it's a smile in Pakistan or in India or in Nepal or in Thailand or in Australia or in the US or in France. That gesture is recognized universally, right? As a friendly expression, as a happy expression. If somebody is crying, the automatic assumption is they are upset or they may be sad. And so across this vast expanse of humanity, there are patterns. There are patterns that that sort of hold us together, and those patterns are in the expression of those low road, really basic, really primal emotions, right? Um, so to clarify for you, um, when a baby cries, it is distressed, whether that baby is an American baby or a Pakistani baby. Yes, it's hungry, maybe, or it's scared, whatever. But perhaps some Perhaps a female child in Pakistan looks at her brother being given more freedom and feels envious of that, whereas an American child looks at her brother being given more freedom and gets angry. So the more complex emotions, like I said, the high road emotions, the experience of them varies, and that can vary culture to culture. But on a broad level, happiness, sadness, pain, these are all common to all of us. It does not matter where we come from, right? Which is, I think, the most beautiful thing about, humanity. Now we come to the less beautiful thing about being human, which is the experience of stress. I've told you guys already that when you are stressed out, it's not a bad thing. Stress has an adaptive function, it helps you. At the same time, repeatedly, we've talked about how too much stress is bad for you. So think of the adaptive value of stress as being positive stressors, okay? Whereas when stress interferes with your functioning, when it is extreme, when it is prolonged, when it goes on for a long time, and you know that phrase, you start to compromise your mental health, then that is negative stress. And so obviously positive stress is what helps you survive, right? So positive experiences of stress, right? So an example could be, if they've done numerous studies of people who've suffered cancer, and a lot of those studies have shown that people who have responded positively to, God knows, I can't even imagine the extreme stress of that diagnosis. And their positive reaction has meant that they've been resilient and they've been, sort of like, I'm going to beat this, I'm going to fight this, and, it doesn't define me, so on and so forth. Those people have been shown to respond more positively to chemotherapy. Well, that's one of the studies that I remember reading. Whereas people who became very depressed and very dejected and very anxious and were unable to regulate those emotions, right? Because let's face it, something like that diagnosis, it will make you depressed and it will make you anxious, and that's perfectly fine. But again, remember, there's an optimal level of stress, right? Remember that? We've been saying that throughout. So people who did not, or let's say were not able to sufficiently regulate that negative stress and sort of redirect that energy towards a more positive stress, did not respond as well to chemotherapy interventions. So again, just something for you to keep in mind as an example of the, very broad ranging sort of manifestations of stress, which are positive, negative, so on and so forth. Now, when we're trying to understand stress, we have to think about the stressor, right? So the cancer diagnosis I just mentioned, that's a stressor. But there are other stressors. For instance, the day before your first, the night before your first day at university, perhaps you were feeling a little, apprehensive, a little stressed out, a little anxious. What's your first day going to be like? Will you make friends? Will you have friends? Will you like your teachers? Will you like the school, etc., etc.? There's so much on your mind, right? But it's not bad stuff per se, unless you start thinking about it like, oh, I'm not going to make any friends, I'm going to hate my teachers, the school is going to suck, everything is going to be terrible, I am going to fail, it's going to be boring, I will not grow, this is not what I want from my life, I don't want this. Your appraisal of a stressor is very directly related to the impact of that stressor on you. Okay, now on the flip side, if those starting university stresses are appraised by you as being, well, this is very exciting, and it's such a cool new challenge, and it's actually going to be nice to break out of my comfort zone and meet people that I wouldn't have met ordinarily, and so on and so forth. And that is a positive appraisal of a stressor, right? Now, obviously, in that positive appraisal, when the day comes, you wake up, you're feeling energetic, you're feeling sort of almost excited again, you want to get to school, you're, in this adventurous mode, you want to explore, so on and so forth, you want to see what's out there. That's your response, but it's determined by your appraisal of the stressor. On the other hand, if you were that kid who said, this is just the biggest catastrophe ever, the likelihood is that when you woke up in the morning, you were not feeling very well rested. You were feeling very, very nervous, very anxious. And, perhaps, hopefully, once you got to school, you met a friend or saw a familiar face that made the distracted, sort of overwhelming anxiety and stress go away. And you hopefully had a good first day at university. So that is, in a nutshell, how stressors, or the perception you have of a stressor, determines your response to a stressor, right? And obviously, the way that you appraise or evaluate, meaning perceive a particular stressor, it has a massive impact on your reaction to the particular situation or to that stressor. So there are lots of different stressors. Some are major, some are minor, right? A minor stressor could be that you're running late and आपके गाड़ी का tire puncture हो गया. Very frustrating, but it's minor, right? It's a fixable problem, hopefully. A massive stressor is, being in a natural disaster situation, in a catastrophe, or experiencing the loss of a loved one or parent. Those are really, really big stressors. And so again, here, our response to those stressors is related to our appraisal of them. And yahan pe, you want to keep in mind something that hopefully we'll have some time to talk about later in the last few classes. Learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is essentially, have we covered it already in this course? No, right? Learned helplessness is the perception that everything good that happens to me because of coincidence or chance, and everything bad that happens to me is happening to me because I am who I am, and therefore there's nothing I can do myself to actively make good things happen for me. So I should just not do anything, right? So it's a complete loss of control, or almost like a abandonment of control, and we call it learned helplessness, and it's associated with depression particularly. And it often happens as a response to traumatic situations or continued traumatic situations, i.e., continued exposure to negative stress, right? So is it becoming clearer for you that how you appraise a stressor really impacts you in many different ways? Now, coming back to the sort of response to a stressor, there's this theory which is called, very conveniently, it's called GAS, or General Adaptation System. In phase one, everything is activated. You know what we were talking about last class, fight, flight, or freeze? So phase one is the activation of the autonomic nervous system, specifically the sympathetic nervous system. If you remember, parasympathetic is the calming one and sympathetic is the arousal one, right? So the general adaptation system is by cellular. Anyway, and then in phase two, you start to resist that stress a little bit, right? And so, sorry, what am I saying? Sorry, this is going to happen a few more times. Bear with me. I apologize. So in phase one, reaction. In phase two, think of it like you're a boxer in a ring getting ready for a fight. Okay? In phase one, you bring yourself to a state of alertness, right? You're reacting to that stressor, your opponent in front of you. In phase two, you're going to maybe, possibly, you're going to get your muscles ready. You're going to take all the power in your body, you're going to direct it towards your fists. You're building your resistance to that stressor that's in front of you, right? And then finally, in phase three, fight is over, you are tired, and you literally just decompress, right? So sympathetic system calms down because the parasympathetic system starts kicking in, everything becomes back to homeostasis, right? So this is just a three-step, or rather he calls it the three phases, a three-phase experience of stress. This is how we experience stress. And now, related to that experience of stress, I just want to quickly tell you about coping with stress. When we are trying to cope with stress, we either do what we respond or manage it by adopting learned helplessness that I just, you know, explained to you. We might try to manage stress by using a problem solving approach, right? Okay, why am I stressed out? My car has a flat tire. What can I do to solve it? I can change the tire. I'm going to be 5 minutes late because of this. What should I do? I will text people and let them know, right? So, again, something stressful happens. The way you deal with it is by looking at it as a problem that you need to solve. Another way of responding to stress is looking at it as from an emotional point of view, where you're like, okay, tire's busted. I'm late for class. I don't have a spare tire. I am never going to make it on time. What should I do? Nothing. I'm just going to sit on this footpath and cry. And that's what you do. You take all your emotions and you just express them and you move on, right? But again, I will repeat all of this, right? It's talking about the way that you are explaining stress to yourself. And by stress, I'm sorry, I mean the stressor. It's all about the way that you are explaining that stress factor to yourself, right? This thing is happening, it's making me feel anxious. What is this thing? Why is it happening to me? How much of a threat is it? How can I deal with it? These are all appraisals, right? So again, appraisal determines reaction, determines coping mechanisms. And finally, related to that idea of learned helplessness, we talk about the sense of personal control. When you place control for everything that happens to you outside of yourself, right? So when bad things happen to me, they're happening to me because I deserve them, okay? It's just the universe that's doing all of this to me. When good things happen to me, that's also the universe just making mistakes, right? I have no control. So that's called an external locus of control, where you really truly believe and buy into this fact that you have no control over anything that's happening to you. And it's fate. It's fate that controls everything. Okay? Whereas if you have an internal locus of control, then you're more likely to think that everything that happens to you, you can impact, you can influence, right? And of course, lastly, quick question. How many people in this class have tried to be on a diet ever in their life? Right? All of us at some point, unfortunately, have tried this ridiculous thing called a diet, which we know doesn't work. Yes, okay, you can stop now. So, what does a diet do? It tests your control of your cravings, right? So essentially, it's a test of self-control. There are much better tests of self-control if you really want to test your self-control, right? If you really want to test your self-control, get rid of a bad habit, discipline yourself, wake up early, so on and so forth, test your self-control. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time for 8 days in a row. There are much nicer ways to test self-control. But anyway, personal control essentially consists of your self-control and also where you are placing control of your life internally, internal locus of control, or externally, i.e., external locus of control. All right. Last but never the least, optimism versus pessimism. The studies are on the slide, so you can look at those later. But the reason we're talking about optimism and pessimism in a conversation or a class about stress is because your level of optimism or your level of pessimism is very, very relevant to your appraisal of a stressor and your response to that stressor. Okay, if you are pessimistic, you are likely to believe that even if you adopt a problem-solving approach to a stressor, you are likely to believe that you will have no impact on this, nothing is going to go your way, which is why this is also related to learned helplessness, right? You just have hopelessness about the future when you have learned helplessness. So again, pessimism impacts that. On the flip side, optimists, and remember, when we are using optimism in psychology, which was related to positive psychology. Somebody mentioned Martin Seligman, so I just want to say that Seligman came up with this construct as of importance to mental health and mental well-being. Anyway, when you're optimistic, you're more likely to think that good things will happen, but more often than not, generally, we think that optimists are unrealistic, okay? And that good things don't really happen and being hopeful is stupid. But actually, optimism is not understood correctly when you refer to it as that. Optimism is not believing that only good things can happen. Actually, in reality, the right kind of optimism is believing that with every possible effort, even if no difference is made, things will get better. That is actually what optimism is. Optimism is rooted in reality, as is pessimism. It's just a tendency. Are you going to look at the light side, the bright side, or the dark side? Okay. So on that note, we are done with motivation and emotion, but don't get too excited because today I want to also start you on the very important and very interesting, I think it's social psychology. Yeah, I think we should start that today. I should stay up every Sunday night and every Tuesday night because clearly I teach a lot faster when I haven't slept at all. And my sense of humor degenerates completely as well, which I just am too tired to apologize for. So 1 second. Okay, while the slide set opens up or whatever, when we are talking about social psychology, the essence of it is to understand what makes humans tick as groups. Okay, how do human beings connect with each other, relate to each other, function as these collectives, or function in pairs? Why do human beings behave in certain ways? Why do human beings want to be with other human beings, right? And what are the relationships between different groups of humans? Why do some groups of humans fight with each other? Why do some groups of humans collaborate with each other, right? So it's almost like understanding human behavior with reference to how we behave with each other on a one-on-one level and how we behave with each other when we're in a group and how we behave with each other when we're in a group, as opposed when how we behave with members of a different group when we are in a particular group. right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do when we study social psychology. And you remember I told you this earlier, man is a social animal, right? And so obviously, when we are talking about our behaviors, the one thing we've talked about throughout is that you cannot disregard the role of context or of the environment. The way you relate to people depends very much on the social context that you are in. And that social context is what teaches you what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what are norms, what are values, right? That's how you know how to be, how to behave, how to relate. Um, at the same time, we know there are people who do not conform to norms, right? We also know that different people can react to the exact same situation very differently because they've interpreted it differently, right? So it's like on the first day of I don't know why I keep coming, I'm just tired now. On the first day of university, you run into someone, you and your friend run into someone who used to be at school with you, who you really didn't like and who really didn't like you. And this person meets you and they're like so happy to see you, and they're smiling and they're like, long time, how was your summer, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of think, wow, this, they're making such a big effort and they must have really grown, and it's so nice to see a familiar face. And then the person leaves. And you tell your friend, hey, wasn't that cool? We ran into him or her. And your friend says, oh my God, that was so fake. This person hasn't changed at all. I think they're still terrible. So you're in the exact same situation, right? But your perception is so different. And that's what social psychology is trying to understand. Okay? Yes, there are so many individual differences in the way we relate to people. And obviously, a lot of it is a combination of, our lived experiences and our personalities. But there are commonalities. There are still patterns in the way that humans interact with other humans. And those patterns are the patterns that social psychology wants to uncover and reveal. Now, in the first case, this is, by the way, related a little bit to heuristics. Do you remember I told you about the cognitive shortcuts that our brain takes to quickly just make a judgment about a situation, right? So similar to those heuristics, sorry, not similar to, these heuristics, right? The representativeness heuristic or the availability heuristic, they contribute to us making an error which is known as the fundamental attribution error. Okay, this example जो मैंने आपको अभी दिया of you and your friend looking at this person, and one of you is attributing the behavior to her being a bad person, and one of you is attributing her behavior to her being a good person. But actually, both of you could be wrong because the behavior is coming from the fact that, this person is now in a completely unfamiliar situation, and because of the situation is genuinely happy to see a familiar face or two, right? So attribution का मतलब होता है कि what are you saying is the cause of something, right? So how are you, let's say, explaining something that you're seeing? What is the cause of something that you witness in a social interaction? क्यों हो रहा है? Most of the time, we make this fundamental attribution error because more often than not, predominantly, we will say that the cause is the person. It's called disposition. Predominantly, we make dispositional attributions, which are usually not very accurate. Whereas we should be making, what did I say 2 minutes ago about the two friends? And they're both wrong because it's actually about the context is another word I use, specific word. What was it? Yes, situational attribution. Mostly it is the situation that causes people to act in certain ways, and it's not actually their disposition. All right. And again, now think about this only in social frames, all right, in social contexts, in context of interpersonal interaction or intergroup interaction. So the good news is, because we live in a collectivist culture, we are less likely to make this fundamental attribution error because we are so full of other people's voices in our heads at all times growing up that we are much less likely to actually just feel, let's say, empowered to say this person is good and this person is bad, and whatever. And we're more likely to consider the situation. And as I say this, I feel the need to also acknowledge that unfortunately the actual events of our country are completely contrary to this. So I don't know, maybe the science is wrong, or maybe I'm not functioning very well at the moment. Anyway, so there's an interesting experiment that was done with a bunch of students, where the researchers made the students talk to this one young woman. And the woman, so they told half of the students that the way she behaves is just on her, it's spontaneous. Whereas they told the other half of the students that we've told her how to act. Okay. So one half thought that this is just who she is, and one half thought that she's been told to act this way. However, in both of those groups, the ones that knew कि इसको कहा गया है इस तरह behave करो, friendly या cold, and the one that didn't know that, both those groups attributed her coldness or her warmth to her disposition and not the situation, despite being told what the situation was. Even that group attributed her behaviors to her personality and not the situation. That is how prevalent fundamental attribution error is, right? So, in a nutshell, next time you want to judge someone, pause, stop, ask yourself, right? It helps. Now, second thing related to, I guess, in a way, the way we see other people is our attitudes towards them, right? Obviously, our attitudes are going to impact our actions, the way we behave. So, for instance, if you believe in something, you're most likely to behave in a way that reflects that belief, right? So, if you believe in animal rights, you're more likely to be caring towards animals, right? You're more likely to take care of animals. You're more likely to put out water for birds in the summer. Small things, right? Small behaviors, but reflective of an attitude. Now, obviously, attitudes are, let's say, pretty stable unless there's like some extreme pressure to change the attitude, right? And attitudes are also very behavior specific. Um, and it's sort of hard, and this is, I'll come to this a little bit later, but there's a connection between the attitude and the action which is not so easily understood. Because, so here's the thing, let's say that you believe that the earth is flat. Okay, please don't believe that, but assume you think the earth is flat. Okay, and you decide to sail a ship and see if it falls off. You keep sailing, you keep sailing, you keep sailing, and guess what? You come right back to where you started. And at that point, an extreme pressure is exerted, and you're like, I'm wrong, right? We have to get some contradictory evidence, which is quite extreme for us to change a stable and long held belief. Okay, it doesn't just happen Attitudes don't just change overnight, right? They are very sticky. Racism, for instance, is belief in an attitude, and it is clearly one of the stickiest ones. And it's of great relevance to social psychology because racism is directly related to how groups behave with each other. And humans evolutionarily are programmed to be suspicious and mistrustful of people who are not within their in group. Okay, in groups and out groups. That's how we function. This is why when you're probably too young and you have probably not seen it, but you should. There's this movie, it's called Mean Girls, and it's very famous for this one scene. I think it was Mean Girls, where this group of really cool, really popular girls keep saying, "You can't sit with us." That is literally group behavior in one scene. Right? You can't sit with us. You are an out group. We are in group. If we let you in, we are compromising our group standards and our group quality and so on and so forth. Or you might take attention away from us. So you are a threat, right? Because you are not part of our group. You're not in group member. You're an out group member. Got it? So we'll talk more about this group behavior, but coming back to this connection between attitudes and actions or behaviors. Have you ever done something that you really didn't think you were ever going to do, but you just did it? Because someone has talked you into it and you didn't even expect that you would be convinced, but you were convinced? It happens, right? If anyone has ever had, if any of you have an older sibling, then this will sort of resonate with you. My brother would often say, "Kecha, close your eyes," and then he would do some nonsense would happen where usually I would get injured, but I was naive and I continued to close my eyes every time. So I really believed that. But anyway, I kept engaging in the action because of my attitude, right? This is my brother. I trust my brother. And my brother was very persuasive. And that sort of quick persuasion is called peripheral persuasion. You don't even think about it, you just do it, right? On the other hand, central root persuasion is sort of like, I'll tell you what it is. When you guys, and do not try this with me because I will not do it. When you guys at the end of the semester try to make arguments for the instructor to change your grades, you construct arguments and you take evidence. I said this in class and I attended all these classes and I am so diligent and so on and so forth. That is called central root persuasion. You are making logical arguments to get someone on your side. When you're in a debate, what do? You use central root persuasion, right? When you're in a fist fight, what do? Whoever shouts the loudest wins. Peripheral root persuasion. Do you get it now? Very quick, very easy to get. Now, have you ever realized that there have been times in your life where something you've done, even if it wasn't something you wanted to do, but you go ahead and let's say you were peripherally persuaded to do it, you're going to do it again, even if you didn't want to do it the first time, even if it's completely opposed to your morality. You'll want to do it again and again. And each time you repeat that behavior, you're going to do it in increments, right? Graffiti is a small example. Spray painting on walls is not something that is considered acceptable, right? It's illegal, actually. It's considered vandalism in so many places, right? And you can go to jail for it. But once you, let's say, are convinced to spray paint a smiley face somewhere, you might the next time want to create an entire snowman, and the next time you want to take up the entire wall and write your poetry on it or whatever. But foot in the door phenomena, that's what it's called. The minute you comply with something, even if it's tiny, and even if it, and especially when it does not agree with your moral standards, you've got your foot in the door. So the next time the opportunity comes up, you're more likely to engage in that behavior. And so over time, your attitude does not impact the behavior, right? Do you remember the obedience study by Milgram with the electric shocks, right? Where it was Milgram, right? And the people just kept pressing the button and shocking and shocking and shocking people. Foot in the door phenomena. They did that first shock, and that's why, even though they were so morally opposed to it, they went ahead and they did like the maximum 400, 450, whatever volts, watts, I don't know. But they did it, right? Foot in the door phenomena, direct demonstration of it. Role playing is another thing that can influence attitude. Okay. So, foot in the door is an example of how behavior can be independent of attitude. Role playing is an example of where behavior can impact attitude, right? And I'll give you a very small example of this, which in psychology, if you remember the prison study by Zimbardo, even though there were a lot of problems with the study, as there were with the obedience study as well, but in Zimbardo's prison study, the students who took on the role of guards, right, they became increasingly vicious, even though that wasn't their temperament. Role playing influences attitudes. In reality, in our actual lives, we can see many stories and many examples, absolutely horrifying stories of the way that prisoners have been treated in America's black sites or America's many unregulated prisons, right? We know the names. There's Abu Ghraib, and there's another really big one, and I can't remember. But anyway, those prisoners that have been treating these, those guards that have been treating these people this way are doing it because they're playing a role. Okay? They're playing the role of protector of my homeland. That's a role they've been taught. And they've been taught that to be the protector of your homeland, you must be vicious and you must be violent. And so they're playing that role, they're performing. And in that performance, the attitude has shifted now. Right? And so the violence becomes worse, the torture becomes worse. That's what happens, right? Now, when we move forward from there, we talk about cognitive dissonance. Do you sometimes do things that you later feel bad about? Right? And you kind of, by feel bad about, I don't mean you were rude to someone because you had a rosa and it was really hot and you were dehydrated. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, let's say you've consistently engaged in a particular behavior, and when you're engaging in that behavior, you think, it's fine, I'm young, it doesn't matter. But there's discomfort within you. Okay, this like persistent sense of dis-ease or unease. When that sort of discomfort happens, it usually means that there's a massive disconnect between our attitudes and our feelings about something and our actions. That's called cognitive dissonance, right? And the biggest sort of signs that I can tell you of cognitive dissonance could be like when you are anxious, or if you are feeling, let's say, having trouble sleeping, if you have insomnia, that is one sign of some sort of cognitive dissonance happening. Yes, Guanton, I can't believe I forgot the name. And Sharik, foot in the door actually just is. You just have to be aware of it, and that's the only way to protect yourself from it. A maturity doesn't really necessarily help. I can tell you this much. And it's on you. It's on self-control. Remember personal control? We talked about that. So coming back to cognitive dissonance, or this like sense of disconnect from yourself that you might feel, that's coming from a space where your actions are not related to what you truly believe and what you truly feel, right? And the more that continues to happen, right, the greater that gap becomes between your actual beliefs and your actual thoughts and your actual feelings and um, um, the way you're behaving. The greater this gap is, the more cognitive dissonance, i.e., discomfort, you will feel. So, again, something to think about. Now, I think I'm gonna talk about, let's see. Hmm. Okay, let's continue for another 5 minutes. Um, I think I'm sorry. Uh, so, I mentioned to you at the beginning of this topic that culture, right? I talked to you about no, wow, I gave you my punchline. I'm sorry, losing my thoughts. Mm-mm. Yes, okay. At the beginning of this topic, I told you that a lot of the ways we behave are dictated by the norms and the values that we are exposed to growing up, right? Norms or values kya hote hain? Norms and values are essentially your cultural context, your cultural environment. And in different cultures, relationships between people as well as relationships between groups of people happen differently. And within different cultures, different groups have different ways of being. Just a small example, think about the ways in which the birth of a baby is celebrated, right? For us, it's about giving mithai to everybody. In the West, it's about having a baby shower and having a gift registry. There are different rituals, and these are cultural rituals, right? Governing what? The behavior of individuals as they relate to groups, right? Um, or think about the ways in which, mm, yes, of course. How many people like cricket? Well, if you like cricket, then clearly you're a real Pakistani, and I am not. But anyway, if you like cricket, you will understand group psychology so well. Because, okay, culture first. Our culture is that cricket is a preferred team sport, right? And so our groups are around those teams that we support. Okay, you support whatever in the IPL or jo bhi hota hai. And then in the US, they have this fascination with what they call, I think they call it rugby or soccer. I don't know, whatever, NFL, whatever. So they have their own little sport. And then there are groups of fans organized around that sport, right? When a match happens, there are certain traditions that are very unique to the States. You have, people dressed in costume, and you have cheerleaders and this and that. When a cricket match happens in Pakistan, you have like, I don't know, Ali Zafar sing a song, and then the match happens, and then there are interviews, right? Different traditions of groups being together, of groups relating to something. And ways that the groups are relating to it and the ways that the groups are being together are determined by what? By culture. And what is bringing those groups together is also determined by culture, right? So you just cannot have a conversation about social psychology without thinking through the role of culture. And in a less ridiculous example than comparing cricket and football, what I can tell you is you've already been studying this. There's a difference between collectivist societies and individualistic societies, right? So obviously in collectivist societies, groups or let's say the members of in groups are more sort of mutually dependent on each other. In individualistic societies, there's more independence between the members of a particular in group, right? So at its most basic, you cannot disregard the very deep impact of norms that are formed from a culture. Okay, and those norms determine, what is the right way for you to act, put simply. Now, I think I should end now before I fall asleep right this minute. I'm not going to. I'm fine. I have actually more work to do. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm gonna go and hopefully finally finish what I need to be doing outside of teaching you. But thank you for your patience. If there was anything you didn't understand today, please write to me. I have definitely had way too much coffee all night, so I am aware that I may have spoken very quickly. So just let me know if there was something I missed or you were confused. Aisha, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you for the good luck.
Ma'am, my group just wanted to stay back and discuss something related to the presentation with you. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine. It's totally fine.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah. So everybody who's not in Aisha's group can leave unless anybody has a question about class. Thank you. I will. Bye bye. Happy Monday. Bye bye. Okay. Is it just your group left now? Anybody here who's not in your group?
There are a couple of people that aren't
Okay,
in
tell
my
me
group.
tell me their names.
Reba Hanif and Fiza Naveed, Rukaiya Marvi.
Hang on. And Rukaiya
Rukaiya,
Marvi is
yes.
clearly asleep. You name one more person. I missed it.
Let me see.
Aisha, Abira, Ayaz, Haya, Rida, Shahan, Shahrukh, and
I
Sid.
think that's all of us.
That's it?
There's nobody. Yes.
Okay, okay, cool. So,
So firstly, ma'am, we wanted to run the topic that we sort of decided by you and just wanted to get a heads up, affirmation. Can we go with it or not? Or yeah, if there's any issues with it, or if there's some way that we can make it better. We decided to do memory, but associated with social media and how social media has affected our memory over time.
mm, tell me more.
Basically, we all have these memories from childhood and growing up. Basically, we started it off as from the usage of smartphones. Like I had a childhood memory that I remembered that when we were kids, we used to have all the numbers of our friends memorized and we just dial them up. But ever since smartphones came, we don't remember even our family's phone numbers because it's just a click away. And this is just a tiny example. It's birthdays, any important event, calendars do that for us, Facebook handles, a lot of stuff. We don't even remember our deadlines. We have apps for that that'll tell us, oh, you have an assignment coming up.
Yeah.
So that's what we were sort of aiming towards. We did not dive very deeply into the research yet because we wanted to get it verified with you first and then get into it.
So it kind of sounds like you're talking about the lack of rehearsal opportunities. And you're not exactly talking about social media, right? You're talking about technology in general.
Yes, technology as a whole.
So you're referring to, you're trying to investigate, let's say you're trying to investigate the impact of technology on our short term memory or long term memory, because दोनों पे है effect.
Yes.
शॉर्ट टर्म मेमोरी पे इफेक्ट है कि आपको आप अगर कोई चीज देखते हो, यू डोंट मेक एन एफर्ट टू इनकोड इट, राइट?
Yeah.
Because you know that you can just Google it again. And like you rightly pointed out, the example of the phone number or the recall of a phone number. So I think this is cool. Yeah. What's your concern about it?
Um,
Uh,
Shahrukh, you can speak.
yeah, so we wanted to design a questionnaire for the primary research, and in that we like wanted to do something different
Mm-hmm.
and like show a picture that is associated with a particular childhood memory. For example, any particular cartoon that brings up a memory related to it, like Tom and Jerry is one that
Can you be
brings a
louder, please?
yeah. So like show a picture that is associated with some childhood memory
Hmm.
that can probably be a cartoon, and then ask questions related to it. So we wanted to do sort of a primary research and then analyze the results that we get from it.
Okay, so you
And
said, sorry, you said show a picture, and then I missed the second step. आपका आवाज कट गया था.
yeah, so then ask a few questions related to it, like what memories does that picture bring in for you?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so like, can we do that? Design a questionnaire in that particular way where we can, um,
Basically, what we're trying to associate with it is people who have, we'll give it to both generations. They'll like our parents and us. We will have two generations filling it out. And we had two ideas for questionnaires. One was this, the picture one, and we were going to judge it based on words, the number of words people use to word limit here, basically, basis pay to describe the memory, cartoon, or whatever it was. And there was somebody pointed out that there's memory tests available online, just intelligence tests. So then we can incorporate that in our questionnaire as well. So which approach is better? Which way should we go, or should we like do both? What That's the sort of advice that we wanted on this.
Yeah, no, neither.
Sorry, I'm gonna hear you.
Don't do either.
So what can we do basically?
I'll tell you why. I'll explain why I'm saying this.
Okay.
Um, if you show someone a photo of you're gonna ask them to get you a photo of a childhood memory. Are you gonna show some sort of like cue, like what?
It's like a common memory, like from something from Tom and Jerry that everybody would have seen or something like that.
Okay, so you will provide a cue, and then you will ask someone to tell you what they remember, right?
Yeah.
And then what do you do with the information? Let's say everyone you meet has very clear memories, तो आप क्या करोगे उसके साथ? What does that show?
Then हमारा वो the whole point of our research वैसे would be कि it hasn't affected it as much. Pro या con वाली चीज में decide
But
होगा हमारा.
remember that we discussed in class के memory is extremely unreliable.
That's true.
ठीक है, वो पहला प्रॉब्लम है कि आपका जो सेल्फ रिपोर्ट आ रहा है डेटा से वो रिलायबल नहीं होगा, क्योंकि आप लोगों से अपनी अर्ली मेमोरीज पूछ रहे हो. ठीक. दूसरी चीज, दूसरा प्रॉब्लम ये है कि your question is asking essentially, like Shahan has said, कि the ease provided by technology has adversely affected our memory, right? That's your thing. That's your hypothesis, right? आप तस्वीर दिखा रहे हो. Where is the tech in it? You might get some really cute stories, but how does it answer your question, right?
That's true.
So that's the first. जो दूसरा आपने जो example दिया कि you give people words, right? That's, if I understood correctly, you said you're going to give people list of words, you have to remember the words and repeat it back to you. Is that what you said?
No, that words part was associated with the picture, so it's just a flop. The other was the memory test really idea.
But you see, memory test के अंदर भी अगर आपके पास डेटा होता कि 15 साल पहले लोगों ने मेमोरी टेस्ट किया था तो इतना सारा रिकॉल था, और अब आप 15 साल बाद वो टेस्ट यूज कर रहे हो तो इस तरह का रिकॉल आ रहा है, right? That's what you need so that you can show impact of tech.
Right.
So
But it wouldn't work on generations like our parents' generations who don't use it as much and they did experience life that way, and us not experiencing it as they did.
Let me think about this. So I think what you really want to do primary research, करना है?
We do want to, because that would make our presentation better. I feel like that's what we are supposed to do.
Okay. Sorry. So
Yeah, we're sorry, ma'am, that you
no.
were already up all night.
Don't apologize at all. Please don't. So here's the deal. I think if you want to do some primary research about this topic, what you should do is come up with a survey. Do you know what a Likert scale is? आपने देखा होगा 5-point scale: agree, disagree, strongly disagree.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but your voice just drowned out. I don't know if I'm the only one who can't hear you or everyone else can as well. I think everyone else can. I don't know. I'm not sure. Sorry.
I'll repeat, not a problem. What I was saying is, you know what a Likert scale is?
I'll just leave the meeting and join again. It might be my internet. I'm not sure.
Haya, can you hear me?
Yes, miss. We can. I think it's Aisha's internet.
Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and explain this tool to you, okay? I'm a little short on time now. Basically, 5-point scale आप develop करो, right? And उसके अंदर आप इस तरह की statements डालो that ask people about the status of their memory and ask people about their perception of how technology has negatively or positively impacted their memory. ठीक है, ये क्वेश्चन है जिसके अंदर आप लोगों से इस तरह के स्टेटमेंट्स देना कि I think my memory of phone numbers, I think that I can easily recall the telephone numbers of my immediate family without my mobile phone. Agree, disagree, strongly, whatever, right? एक question ऐसे आ गया, for instance. तो आपने डालने दो किस्म के सवाल. एक सवाल about the status of memory or what they think their memory is right now, with statements like this. The second kind of statements you should be putting is what is their perception of the role technology is playing in their memory, whether it's making it better or making it worse. So, for example, I enjoy playing word games on my phone to boost my recall of vocabulary. Agree, disagree, whatever, right? So, sorry, instead of saying positively or negatively technology ko dekh rahe ho, rather you're trying to explore the predominance of technology in their life or how they actually use technology, right? तो फिर आपकी सर्वे से आपके पास 2 types of data आ जाएंगे. आपकी सर्वे का पहला part which you're asking about the use of your memory and the conditions of your memory, that gives you the background of the information you're getting. And that information you're getting is essentially on how memory is, let's say, supporting maybe or detracting from people's daily experiences of trying to remember something. Okay. Now, this is only going to be one tiny part of your presentation, because you do need to do some secondary research. And before you go ahead with this survey plan also, I suggest कि 1-2 दिन आप लोग कितने 8 लोग हो 9 लोग हो, everybody should aim to read one article about the relationship between memory and technology in the next day or two. आपको बहुत clarity मिलेगा उससे. You know, each of you read an article, no articles हो जाएंगे, have a discussion and figure out your presentation. That's my honest advice. Okay. Primary research, I'm loving the fact you want to do it. This is how I would advise you to do it. This is the easiest way for you to do it right now. You're freshmen. Use Google Forms. Google Forms से automatically आपके survey data analyze हो जाएगा, आपके charts भी बन जाएंगे. You know, so simplify it and do focus on the secondary research. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for the help, ma'am.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Anything else you need?
If anybody else has any questions, I'm done.
Nay. All right. Okay, guys, take care.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
No problem. Good luck.
Allah Hafiz. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.